Hello and welcome to another episode of the Manufactured Leads podcast with me, Mark Bracknell, Managing Director of Theo James Recruitment. Today, we welcomed on Umayr Idrees, the Head of Workload Optimisation at Hitachi Rail. Umayr was one of the most passionate and inspiring people I would say I've met and had on the podcast. This was an absolute pleasure. We talked in depth about some real deep issues, including ethical leadership and both the responsibility and actually opportunity that manufacturers have right now to prioritize, but actually lean into it to make sure that they can appeal to the new generation. We talked about the new generation in this episode a lot, and actually the new age leadership and what companies can do to try and make sure that they are looking after their succession planning and appeal to the younger generation. We talk about KPIs and we talk about what KPIs to look at in your factory to make sure you are as optimal as possible. And then we just talk in general about manufacturing, collaboration, what needs to happen to be a real powerhouse in manufacturing and stopping burying our heads in the sand that the UK is in a great place right now. We talk about the real issues and what we indeed need to do to improve it. So this is a really, really interesting and quite deep episode. And as I say, Umayr is unbelievably inspiring and particularly inspiring to young people looking to get into the industry. It's an episode, again, I would probably look to show perhaps your children who are maybe a bit lost in their way, but potentially interested in this industry. So thank you, Umayr, for this episode. It felt very, very powerful. Please sit back, watch and listen and enjoy. Once again, please just click that like and subscribe button now, because that would really help continue to grow the show. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoy the episode. Fantastic. So a warm welcome today to Umayr Idrees, the Global Head of Workload Optimisation at Hitachi Rail. I had to write that down and read it. It's the most complicated job title I've had on it. So welcome, Umayr. How are we doing? You okay?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me on. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, really good, really good. So look, I can't wait to dig into this. We've got some real meaty stuff to get into. So I fascinated by all this. But first question is the same question I ask everyone. What does it mean to you to be a leader?
So for me, I think a leader is one that sets the fire inside you. I think a leader is one who inspires, empowers. You don't need a title to be a leader. There's people that are very senior that might not be leaders, and vice versa. You don't necessarily. If you think about a sports analogy, you have multiple leaders on the football pitch. So that's one thing. You definitely don't need to be a title to be a leader. I think leaders always put themselves, lead the way, but then they put themselves last. So if you think the ship's sinking, they'll always make sure the people under their responsibility are first, and then they put themselves last. Or if you're trying to influence and create an impact, you're the first person making the step. And I think a leader is the original influencer. Everyone wants to be an influencer these days. And leadership for millennia, if you think about religious figures or political figures or other, that leaders were the original influencers that could influence the masses or individuals or have an impact on people's lives. And there's a quote like, a leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. So you've got to have the knowledge as a leader in terms of knowing the way, which way to go. And they go the way in terms of the actions. So your actions have to follow your words, your attitude, your behavior, your actions all have to be aligned. Showing the way, which is a large part of leadership, creating that path for other people, mentoring, developing, showing people this is the way, and leading people down that way. And I think that is quite succinct in terms of encompassing what leadership is and all about.
Yeah, it's a great answer and really well sort of explained it. And I guess everything you're talking about there is that responsibility piece. Have you ever felt that pressure to be all those things you just said? Because it's a lot, isn't it?
It is a lot. I think, I've always felt myself in terms of my own background. If I go back to the story, I lost my dad when I was 15, and I had to become the head of the house, being the eldest. And I feel like that was my first step into leadership, having to be the man of the house, the man of the family. And I think a lot of it's come natural in terms of throughout my life, my personal life and my career, about how just being a leader and learning. It doesn't mean you know everything. I mentioned to you when we discussed previously about listen to podcasts, I read books on it. I'm always trying to learn and understand, and even managers and leaders that I've had, what's good, that's worked, and what do I want to take on board. Just because you're a leader doesn't mean you have all the answers. Um, but you've got to be willing to learn, willing to listen. And it is a lot. I absolutely agree. It is a lot, but you can't, you've got to have humility. You've got to be down to earth, and you've got to be willing to listen to other people. I think the other thing that I want to add in terms of what leadership is, it's not about you. It's about everyone else. It's about everyone, including yourself, but you need to be thinking about others. And I think if that you lead with that, and there's a lot written about servant leadership these days. I think you can't go wrong, despite there being a lot to it. If you always put other people first, you really can't go wrong.
Have you seen that change over time, would you say? Because I think leadership now is very different than it used to be. Have you seen that gradual change in terms of, putting yourself first, would you say, over others?
I think so, yeah. I think the other thing that I've learned when you're early on in your career, I mean, you don't know everything. Even now, I'm still learning. But I think one thing that I would add is situational leadership. So
Yeah.
you can't have one tool. It's like having a toolbox, and you're constantly using the hammer for everything. And that's the wrong approach. You got people that are, on board with your ideas, people that are not on board with your ideas, people who need extra support, people who learn differently. And you've got to adapt your leadership style to suit each individual scenario, each individual case. And we're all human. We've all got different behaviors. We've all got emotions. It's different each day. But as a leader, I think that's one thing that has changed over years from, back in the 90s to now. There's a lot more emotional intelligence, a lot more thinking about mental health, a lot more trying to understand, right, how can I get the best capability out of somebody, but not through, it's got to come from them. You've got to create the conditions as a leader for them to within themselves be motivated and have that drive to do something. And I think that's a different style to what potentially used to be even many years ago, decades ago.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I've seen that myself. Impossible question this, but why do you think it's changed? Because I think you're right. The emotional intelligence, the mental health piece, all these things now, which are part of modern day leadership. Why do you think it has changed from what it used to be?
I think partly it's a generational gap or difference.
Yeah.
Like myself, I'm a millennial, and I think differently to older generations. I think differently to the following generations, generation Z and Alpha. And I think part of it, even the younger generation now, one example is climate change. That's a forefront. There's a lot of people that ask young people, culture, what's the culture of the business? What are you like with social responsibility, with climate change? And those questions might have been asked before, but I don't think there was prominence as they are now. People are a lot more aware. My kids are young and they're in school and they're talking about recycling, and that's going to be important. Sustainability, and these are the kind of things that people were less maybe aware about. And I think the advent of the internet's definitely helped in terms of information dissemination, the availability of information. Or AI now, we've got a supercomputer. You can ask a question in an instant. I think we're more informed. With this being in the information age, and that's why it's driving people to ask those questions, and therefore leadership needs to rise up to the challenge about how do we manage people's requirements, customers' requirements, your employees' requirements, as well as meeting the business needs as well.
Yeah,
so I think we've had to adapt.
I think it's a really good point there about the technology and information at our fingertips, because when I was growing up, there was the internet. I was sort of, I'm 39, so I was the dial-up internet when I was little, but I missed that social media age. I missed that sort of everything at your fingertips. I mean, now, like you say, you can ask ChatGPT to do anything for you, as an example. But there's so much information now, and obviously there's a lot of negative stuff about growing up with social media. And I agree, I would have hated to grow up with those pressures. But now you can learn anything. Do you know what I mean? You can literally type something in YouTube and become an expert to some extent.
Absolutely.
Yourself. Absolutely. which is massive, isn't it? And I think that's probably, like you say, been a big part of changing people's leadership techniques.
Absolutely. And I think what you said about being an expert, I agree with that, because when they say you want to be a master of something, I think it's 10,000 hours.
Yeah, is
a rough estimate of what you need to spend to master something.
Yeah.
And because everything's available at our fingertips, you don't have to go to get a trip to the library. You don't have to find a book. You don't have to, return it and read it within 4 weeks and all that kind of good stuff. It's literally in our pockets. You could learn something right now, today, tomorrow, and you could be an expert in a very short space of time, which wasn't really possible before. So I think that's definitely contributing. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned that sustainability piece, and I guess that sort of links in with that leadership piece, and I've seen the shift in manufacturing the last probably 5 years. I would say I've seen, maybe even 2 years, I've seen a shift where companies have gone from this is something we're going to have to do because we're told to, versus they're now seeing it is a real positive, still challenging, but real positive, where actually they can link the new generation of workforce into it, and actually manufacturing needs to play its part, doesn't it, into that whole piece. And I think
Absolutely.
leadership whole piece. What are your thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. I think you're right. I think part of it was demand driven in terms of
Yeah.
customers are now asking for it, employees are now asking for it, and that's forced the hand. But I think this is what we might go on to a little bit later in terms of ethical leadership. What's the right thing to do? What's your values and principles? Regardless if it's hard or not, are you making the right decisions that benefits not just yourself, but the wider society, in terms of your locality, nationally, or even globally? And I think that's got to be brought, considered within manufacturing. We're going to, advanced manufacturing now, advanced manufacturing techniques. We've got robotics, we've got complex supply chains, we've got globalization. Things are changing in a way that they didn't used to. We're competing with the likes of previously Eastern Europe from a manufacturing point of view, and the Far East, in terms of the UK and the Northeast. And we've got to be considering, right, where's the industry going? What is the demand of customers? As well as regulations, as well as what the governments are requesting, as well as what the UN is requesting. I think that's all got to play a part in terms of, right, what's the right thing to do from a manufacturing point of view in terms of sustainability, in terms of materials, in terms of efficiencies, not wasting talent, resources, materials, the whole package. I mean, manufacturing's got a big part to play in that. Versus a lot of other sectors. If you talk about other professions, manufacturing has a huge impact on the community economy, as well as the workforce, the circular economy. It has an impact on society, from local to a global level. So I think we can certainly, within a locality in the Northeast, we can make a massive difference.
Yeah.
And it just needs that leadership, ethical leadership, to do it. I think that's the solution.
Yeah, I really agree, and it's gonna take some time, isn't it? It's interesting because a lot of the stuff I used to put out online, and no, I don't believe it, but I've always said UK powerhouse manufacturing. It's always been. But the more people I speak to, the more concerned I am about where the UK is right now in comparison to other countries, because the mindset's changed. But I guess it has a little bit, where I think the more we bury our head in the sands that it's this fantastic beast, it could be and it should be, and hopefully it will be. But right now, it's got big challenges. And if it doesn't step up and do something about it, we'll get left behind all the countries you've just mentioned. What's your opinion on that? Because mine started to change a bit.
Absolutely. I think with Industry 4.0 coming in, I think there's a lot of changes in terms of dynamics, in terms of cost. Is it efficient for businesses to operate? An example, the steel industry, that's absolutely decimated now. And many other industries that have fallen down. UK was one of the first industrialized nations. And look at us compared to the likes of Germany and Japan and other industrialized nations in terms of what their exports are, what their productivity levels are. And that's not because of the workforce. I think we need to utilize technology. I think we need to become more efficient. I think we need to use lean manufacturing. And there's so many things that people are doing in terms of regulations are different. We've come out of the EU in terms of Brexit. That's adding a lot more red tape and regulations. There's things that we aren't doing that other countries are doing. And bear in mind, we're competing on a global field. So yeah, I think it's really important. I think we've got to step up and we've got to compete if we want the Northeast, the UK to prosper. And when I touch on ethical leadership, I think globally we can solve a lot of challenges, including climate change, by contributing in the right way.
In your opinion, how do companies start to improve that ethical leadership piece? Because some companies it's at the forefront. Some companies are still archaic and this is the way they've always done it, so they won't change. If you were to step into a new role in a company that just didn't really know that much about it and just it hadn't changed in 20 years, what would be the first things you would start to influence and try and change?
Good question. I think the first thing is you got to know what your values are. I think what's your principles? And everyone's programmed in a certain way because of our environment, because partly our genetics as well. But what are we programmed to believe? It might be religious beliefs, it might be cultural beliefs, it might be societal norms, and that's got to be the starting point. And you've got to know morally and ethically what's right and wrong, and stand by that. And that's what integrity is. I think integrity is a big part of ethical, leading with honesty, with transparency, with integrity. And if you're doing that, and we're talking about leadership, then others will follow suit. If you're making the tough decisions, even if it has a detrimental impact on you, and you're doing it with integrity, people are seeing that, and that's what leadership is. So if you want to make an impact in that regard in a business, you've got to start with yourself. Look inward first. Be the change you want to see in the world. And it starts. The world doesn't change by opinions; they're changed by your actions. And I think that's got to be the starting point in any business. Look inward, and then look at, right, where is the delta? Yeah. What is the delta between where you want to be and where you are now? And what are the goals? A goal without a plan is just a wish. So what is the plan to get us there? And yeah, I think that's the way to go about it, and making people aware. I think thank you for the opportunity for bringing me on and talking about these things. But this is where it starts, isn't it? People might have a thought, people might discuss things, ideas, and it might trigger a thought that actually, for example, climate change or whatever else it might be, equal pay, gender equality, whatever it might be, is really important, and that can only happen through discussion and dialogue. So I think you've got to lead the charge, and bring people on that journey, and that's what leadership's all about.
Whose responsibility is it, do you think? If you look at the global issues and the 17 UN sustainable practice and all this type of stuff need to change, whose responsibility is it? Do you think it's the government responsibility to feed information into companies? Do you think it's individuals that need to get together? Is it the companies? Because it just seems very disjointed to me, all this sort of stuff. Who needs to lead the charge, do you think, for this?
I think it's a bit of both, but I think this is individuals. I really do, because the government doesn't always talk for the people. I mean, we know that very well, and that's the same way with a lot of countries. They've got their own vested interests. You've got lobbying groups that influence them, and who's going to know what's best but you, in terms of what's right for your community, and I think it's got to start with us, and we're the ones that need to pass that message on to others. And when you've got a critical mass of people, you can make anything happen. You can make changes happen. I think the government does have a part to play, and an important part. And if they're not playing that part, an example is social media companies, where they're not regulating them. They think social media can regulate itself. And we see the problems societally that are being caused by that. Or an example, the water industry, when you have regulators and they might not have the teeth to stop waste being dumped into lakes and rivers. So government has a part to play, but I think each of us have a part to play, a massive part to play. And that's what we always need to consider. And it's up to us to step up. The UN sustainability goals that you touched on, the 17 sustainability goals about, defeating poverty, gender equality, about sustainable farming and fishing and looking after the planet, all those things. Who's going to fix that? We don't have an Avengers team. If you had the Avengers, you'd give them a list. Here's the 17 things you need to tackle. Yeah. And we don't. So it's up to us, each of us, to do that. To work together to tackle the big problems as well as the small ones.
And you mentioned that work together piece, and I think that brings us on to that collaboration. How well do you think, and let's use the Northeast manufacturing as an example, how well do you think the Northeast manufacturing industry collaborates? And how could we do it better, do you think? Because I think what we're talking about here, that needs to happen. Otherwise, there's just various companies doing their version of what they think's right.
Yes, yeah, definitely. In terms of it, you're right. There'll be silos otherwise, and I think there's great collaboration already in the Northeast. My current business that we're at, we're working with Hyperdrive in terms of battery development, and various other things within the supply chain. Just our company alone is supporting 130 plus suppliers within the Northeast in terms of the supply chain. That has a massive impact on the economy as well, on jobs, in terms of quality of life, and so that collaboration piece is really important. If someone, one of those business or several of those business collapse or unsuccessful, that has a knock-on impact. So we need to help each other. And a good experience I had a couple of months ago when I was there, I heard from them that once their workforce don't have any work, they ask around the estate, around the area, do you need any welders? Do you have any painters or whatever it might be? Do you have any design engineers that we need for this short project? And that's across companies. That's incredible. And things like that, those great ideas, I think we can take a leaf from that. I think there's great collaboration happening already, but that's not to say we should stop. Let's keep working and improving because it's a competitive landscape. And it's kind of dog eat dog in terms of businesses. And if the business isn't viable, collapses, it has a massive impact, as you know, in terms of deprived areas, in terms of workforce, in terms of circular economy. So manufacturing has a big part to play. And if we think about collaborating and working together, helping each other, even across businesses, across industries, or even the same industry, working with competitors, I think that'd be a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many, isn't there? Because I think, if anyone's listening and their business isn't part of one of these networks, then there's so many about. The Northeast Lowland Engineering Manufacturing Network. Obviously, Acliff has got a huge networking piece there. You've got Advanced Manufacturing. You've got so many, and it is great what they do because exactly what they say. Yes, they're in competition. There might be competition for work. There might be competition for people, but the more we work together, the better the industry, the region can be. Because otherwise, and I hate it when I see companies working, for China and Dubai, or just on price. It's there needs to be some incentives to try to make sure we bring it locally and collaborate. It's just the challenges, isn't it, now where financially it's a challenge for a lot of companies, and that price importance could potentially keep rising. Particularly, obviously, this mail may not go out before by the time this comes out, the budget will have come out, and it'll be interesting to see what's come of that. And again, there could be some challenges off the back of that could be another reason why companies could have to make decisions based on price. It's that's a concern, isn't it? That type of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And although we might not be able to compete with things like material costs, there's other efficiencies, massive efficiencies. How well are we balancing supply and demand, which is what I'm doing currently. And so balancing of supply and demand is the mechanism for making profit. If you've got too much supply, and not enough demand, then it's inefficient. You're paying for inventory. You've got a workforce that might be expending hours, not value added time, and that's a cost of the business. Or equally, if it's the other way around, you're not able to satisfy customer demand, you might not be able to meet all the customer obligations, and then you start losing work. So it's the balancing of the supply and demand, which is really crucial within a business, and especially project-based business where it's feast and famine, or even business as usual operations. It still has a part to play in terms of we can make efficiencies despite materials being a challenge, or input costs and regulation. What have we maximized what we could potentially do? And I think there's a lot of scope, for example, artificial intelligence coming in. There's huge productivity gains we can get from that. Or even in my previous experience, just sitting, how often does anyone sit and just look at the process and say, hang on a second, are we actually following what's written on the paper? Often the times in my own experience is no. So let's look at the current state, and then let's feature value stream map in terms of where do we want to get to. And put that in place. And there's so many places we can find efficiencies, and lean is a good place to start in terms of the 8 wastes within lean manufacturing. So what can we do? There's things out of our control, but there's things within our sphere of influence that we can control.
Apologies for interrupting this podcast with a very quick 30-second description of my business. Theo James are an engineering and manufacturing recruitment search firm based in Durham. We specialise in contract and permanent opportunities, from blue-collar, semi-skilled roles right the way up to C-suite level exec positions. If you're looking for any new additional staff or new opportunity for yourself in the industry, please contact me or the team. There'll be a specialist in your area waiting to help. I'm incredibly proud of this business and what we've built since our inception in 2015, and I would love to extend that service out to you. So thank you very much. Hope you enjoy the episode.
And we should.
Yeah. Because all these things are opportunities, aren't they? Because we are so fantastic at what we do. It's not as though we're miles behind. We can absolutely get there, and I completely agree. That innovation and that sort of what you're talking about there in terms of just making sure that companies understand their process and how they can improve on it. I know that's something you're obviously very passionate about, and obviously with your job title, the head of workload optimization is a big, I imagine, a big piece of that. How can companies who don't necessarily optimize their workforce workload now start to look at? What the key things you would look at? I guess the KPIs you might look at to make sure that everything's running as smoothly as it possibly can do.
Yeah, so I think, well, across industries and across different sectors, what's common? You're selling a product,
Yeah.
or service. What's your unit of measure across those products? Is it hours or is it units? How many, and what's the time period? So, if we're doing, in my previous business, P&G, we were doing, hundreds, thousands of fragrances a day. What's the, how many are you producing in a week? If you're doing bespoke manufacturing, low speed, high complexity, how many units are you producing in a month? So what's the time period you're looking at in terms of units per month? So once you've got your demand, what you can start forecasting your demand, but then also you've got to look at the supply side of the equation. What's our capacity internally, and where are the bottlenecks in order to supply that? So you got your value stream, your value chain. You've got to go through X machines. You got to weld. You've got to paint. You've got to then assemble and test, etc. Right? How many units can you produce within a given time frame, within the month, within a week, right now, with the workforce you've got? And I think that's a starting point. Overlay the two. What's the delta? What can you do different? What's the controls that you can put in place? Can you double your shifts? Can you buy another machine because that one's a bottleneck? Can you make that more efficient in terms of changeovers? What are you doing in terms of the capacity side, but also on the demand side? Are you over or under capacity? Right? Where do you want your marketing and sales team to drive? You've got a gap in workload in a year's time, 6 months' time, right? Which areas do you want to work down? What are the priority customers now that might give us repeat work in 6 months' time, in 2 years' time? In terms of that bigger strategy, what are the products that we want to sell in the market in 2 years? What's the R&D strategy? How many millions do we want to spend now today for X product in 3 years? For which customers? And I think that's got to be the main KPIs in terms of, right, what's your supply side of the equation? What's the demand side? Put it together. What's the delta? Because that's going to cost you money. It's going to cost you inefficiency. It's going to cost you customer dissatisfaction. It's going to mean you've got liquidated damages on your contracts. That's painful. So that's where it's got to start. It's got to start with balancing the equation. And I think this is where ethical leadership comes in. It's not just about profitability. This is my own view. I think it's got to be people, planet, peace before profitability. This is my own personal view. And I think that's where ethical leadership, do you create profit at, no holds barred? And examples we give, loan shark companies, do they have ethical practices? Do companies that work in fast fashion and are exploiting workforces across the world, or weapons manufacturers, governments are now dropping bombs on refugee camps? Are those ethical? And are we supporting that? Are we supporting that, or are we against that? We can, individuals and individually, make those conscious decisions.
Yeah.
So I think those things come first before profitability. But yeah, profitability is absolutely key for any viable business.
And for me, that links in as well with, we talk about younger generation. They want to be part of something good, something green, something that's adding value. They want to have a real purpose now. I don't think people necessarily that was at the forefront. So I think the opportunity here as well is to, if that is the business you're in, to sell that, because it's a big part of, you talk about retention, recruitment, and everyone's talking about this, but it's a massive issue. But people pulling these levers, like say, get that in place first and make sure that you're as sustainable as you possibly can do, your ESG and all that. Make sure you've got your teams and do it internally, and then you sell it as a business, because people
Absolutely.
want to be part of something now, don't they? It's that's your low.
Yeah, definitely. I think what I've heard from the past, in terms of the older generations, you'd have a job for life, or you'd stay for an X amount of time. And you're probably seeing it yourself in recruitment. That's quite probably uncommon now.
Yeah.
People are moving within every few years.
Yeah.
And there's so many options out there. So how do you retain talent? What's your value proposition? Not just for customers, but employees as well.
Yeah.
What are you offering in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion? What are you offering in terms of more than just the salary? You've probably seen yourself. That's not the factor why people are changing jobs now.
Yeah.
That's one of a number of factors. And I think we've got to get a full package right. What's the culture? What's the vision? Do people feel empowered? Does it align with their own personal values and goals? I think these are all very important steps in terms of understanding the current workforce, the future generations that are coming, or even the older generations, and what's the value proposition that you can offer as a business in order to retain that talent.
Yeah. It's because I think actually, funnily now that that job for life thing's almost become it's almost a negative connotation now. If you see someone's CV, they've been somewhere for 30 years, because it used to be brilliant. This is a sure bet. If we, they've been somewhere for 10, 15, 20 years, they'll do the same for me. Now, that's almost like, oh, they've not risked going somewhere else. It's suddenly become a negative. And it is. And I think people move on after, if you get 5 years out of someone, that's probably now the new sort of 25 years to some extent. So that you've got to lean into that for me. And actually, it's not the end of the world if you get new people every 5 years, because you get new ideas, you get new, change the business. So I think if you can set your business up to make sure that a churn which is under a year is negative, that's just you're retraining. But I think if you're
Yeah.
looking for that 3 to 5 year mark, and you can train someone, they can leave your business in a better place, and they'll leave you in a better place than they were in. It's a perfect match for both. But it's I think a lot of businesses are quite behind that, but it's a mindset for me they need to shift into.
Yeah, definitely. I think attrition, you need attrition in terms
Yeah,
of, you can't get new ideas, new workforce coming in, new way of doing things. Otherwise, if you're stagnant and stationary, everyone else is moving on.
yeah,
If you're standing still, you're going backwards,
yeah,
essentially.
yeah.
So you've got to be, aware of all that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's and manufacturing can be a funny sector for that. I'd say, I'm a stereotype here, but food manufacturing traditionally was, we can only ever take people with food. They must have food experience. You must have food experience, and then you get the same people doing the same job and the same ideas, and then that industry suddenly becomes so far behind an industry like automotive, for example.
Yeah,
And then it's probably going to be renewables and all. It's you need to, like you say, bring new ideas to change things. It's an interesting one.
yeah.
I guess one of the biggest issues as well in manufacturing now is that succession planning piece. And actually, I think something that we've seen is that because of the pay scale and the supply and demand piece, you've got engineers now earning a heck of a lot of money, and in many instances more than managers. And now managers are actually, in some situations, paid less than the people they're managing, probably for a more stressful for job, which is now becoming, means it's harder to find sort of senior people. How do we look to bring on the new age of the new generation of leaders, in your opinion, you think?
I think it's got to go back to what is it that you're offering in terms of things like career program as well. Why would somebody leave your business if you're offering them a genuine path, a career path? And we've all seen it in terms of the promises that X, Y, and Z is going to happen. But what is it that people are seeing, in the workplace? If you've promised X, Y, and Z that something's going to happen in 5 years, they're looking around to see other colleagues that have been promised X, Y, and Z, and they're seeing them move on. If they're seeing them move on, then why would anyone leave if you created a clear career path, or even moving across departments and gaining? It doesn't necessarily have to be upwards, but how are you creating that change? And keeping people engaged. It's
Yeah,
a lot of it's about engagement and motivation. How do you do that? And I think that's really important in terms of the new age, as you're saying, in terms of what is it that you're offering in terms of that total package, and not just salary.
yeah,
It's way more than that. I think it's way more than that these days, and that's how you're going to attract the best talent and keep the best talent as well.
yeah,
Because another competitor is going to be offering those things, and that's where you're going to be losing the talent, and that's why the market rate's going up. You're saying the engineering rate has gone up. That's why the market's going up, because of the demand is there. It's supply and demand again.
yeah,
Um, and we don't have enough engineers coming through. It was like that when I was studying. I knew that many of them, the engineers, would be retiring, in the 2020s, 2030s, and going to be a shortage, and that's what's coming to fruition.
yeah,
And I think that's got to start. That's partly again government, and it's partly us. What can we do to inspire the next generation of people into engineering, so we don't have the skills shortage that we desperately need, within manufacturing to be successful?
yeah. Why do you think you do what you do? And you're someone who is extremely experienced for, the career you've had already is superb, and the status you've got, chartered status now, in terms of why
That's
was
right.
that important for you pushing to that level, would you say, in a short space of
I
time?
think so. Going back, um, as a kid, I was playing with Lego. I was building things. I had a robotics invention system. My dad got me a PC when I was young, and I was using MS DOS, Windows 3.1, and I was just into gadgets, technology, space,
Uh-huh.
all of that stuff, and engineering. I wanted to be an inventor when I was young, And I still remember the day my dad used to take me regularly on the weekend to the library, and he gave me the book of careers A to Z. And he said, and I was looking through that, and I found engineering, and, and that's what an engineer is. You know, an inventor is an engineer.
Yeah.
And it had all the different types: engineering technician, incorporated engineer, chartered engineer. And I remember in the book, said that's the goals. And I thought that was the day. And I thought, you know what? That's what my goal is. I'm going to be a chartered engineer. And that's all I've done through my life in terms of my GCSEs, my A levels, my year in industries that I've done, my degree. Doing a master's, you have to do a period of further study to become chartered. You have to hit 20 benchmarks in terms of experience, financial management, people management, problem solving, bringing new initiatives, various things in order to get that. And I thought that's the bar for me. And sadly, my dad passed away, as I mentioned, when I was 15. And that's been always my goal. He set me off on that path. And that's been, relentless. It's been blood, sweat, and tears together. And for me, it's been a hell of a ride. And that for me is my Everest in terms of what I've been through from being young. And it's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears together. And I think it's really important. It gives recognition for your knowledge, skills, and experience that have been honed over years. And I think I think for anyone who's young, who's inspiring to be an engineer, I think it's a great target to have in terms of corporate engineer, engineering technician, or chartered. But even an engineering career, it's very rewarding. And with status, without status, chartered status, it's a very rewarding career. So for me, it was very important, and I based my life around that achievement.
And you're a real inspiration, and I think the world needs to see more people like you, and actually see more people like you. And what I mean by that is, I think there'll be a lot of 12, 13-year-old Umayrs, and in the classrooms now, who perhaps haven't got the same inspiration, the same leadership you had with your dad, and that's a real sad shame, I think. Do you know what I mean? Because there's I think some people are just born to have that inventor-esque creative mind. My little lad's 5 now, and he wants to see how things work. And when something breaks, I can see him want to understand why it's break. And I'm not like that at all. I can't put a picture up. So it's interesting that, Nate's definitely, it's just I know where he gets it from. But I think some people are born with that sort of mindset. And I just think this is where, again, the people can do more. Do you know what I mean? Don't get me wrong, there's some companies doing some fantastic things, and Hitachi, without doubt, one of them in terms of that piece going out to schools. And I work closely with the UTC in Newton Aycliffe, the college there, and what they do is fantastic. Obviously, there's the Hitachi link there, but if anyone doesn't know, that's a school in Newton Aycliffe, which is a school where it's a proper Ofsted GCSE school for specialist engineering subjects, and it is incredible. I don't know if you ever walk around, but it's unbelievable, like the kit they've got and the opportunities they have. But still the links for them when they finish to get into work, that's still a bit weak. That still needs to be stronger. There still needs to be more companies in the area to collaborate and give those people the opportunities, because there's still going to be a massive gap between them leaving that and them being capable of being able to work in those sort of environments. But there needs to be more of this, and there needs to be that gets back to collaboration piece, because there's some amazing stuff out there, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And Hitachi was one of the founders of that, the University Technical College, and I didn't get confused with them. The biggest thing is they've got passionate people, passionate students. And I think when you're young, anyone who's listening to this who's young, what have you got to offer in terms of skills, knowledge, etc.? And same for myself, I didn't have a lot, but one thing you can bring is passion. The passion will drive you, and the passion that you've got, people can see that. I did mock interviews with UTC, and I could see the passion was oozing. And you think, why wouldn't you give this kid a chance? Why wouldn't you? And see what they can do. That's what they're aspiring for. That's what they're dreaming of. That's what they've got a passion in. And you don't necessarily need to be good. I feel like you can, if you want to do anything, you just put your mind to it. You can do anything. It doesn't matter if there's a bit of talent. If you're good at tinkering or whatnot, or you're good at football and whatnot, but you can, some things you might not be able to learn as well, like a footballer. But there's a lot of things you can absolutely, if you spend the time and the effort and you're dedicated and committed and relentless, you can achieve anything. Genuinely, you can achieve anything. And young people need to think about that. If they need to decide now, today, not tomorrow, next year. Now, what's my goal? What's my vision? you can do anything you want. You just decide. And if you've got passion inside you, that'll get you places. And when things are hard and the days are tough, and they will be, it's the passion that gets you through. And that's, I think, what UTC and other colleges and other institutions, I went to Northumbria University, Newcastle, Worlding, Durham University. These are all on our doorstep in the Northeast. These are world-class establishments. And let's utilize them. I'm a big proponent of education, and I know there's other paths. There's apprenticeships. You can do technical routes as well. But for me, and what that's the way I would push my kids in the same way that I was pushed. I think education, that there's a quote: education is your passport to the future, and I absolutely believe that. So any young people listening in, that's where you've got to start. Start with your passion and just be willing to learn. It doesn't matter if it's formal education or otherwise. You can get that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You word that so well. And look, for me, this is why I love getting people like yourself on. Passionate, driven people who've walked the walk and will inspire people. Do you know what I mean? That's ultimately will, because there's a lot of people out there with skill, vision, intelligence, but maybe just lack that little bit, and that can just be drawn out by people like you and hearing it, because there's a lot of lack of self-belief in some situations. Some perhaps had a tough time at school or whatever, and this type of stuff for me can inspire people to go, yeah, because whatever you want to do, exactly say, you just have to work hard at that thing.
Absolutely.
And even if you don't get to that goal you want to get, the skills you're going to learn along that way is going to get you somewhere. Essentially,
absolutely. I think the two things in terms of my own personal formula was work hard and pray hard, and that's all you need. And you can do anything. You can absolutely do anything. I think it starts. You've got to start young. You've got to just first understand what's your vision and what you want to do. And when I was young, I remember, I've always wanted to do engineering in terms of, and I couldn't even get work experience. I don't know if things have changed now. I'm guessing they've improved. You've got LinkedIn, you've got networking. I couldn't get any work experience whatsoever. And you know what? I went to a dentist. I did shadowing at a dentist surgery when I was 17, and that actually set me back, because when my first job was at Northumbria Water, I went for the interview, and I had the interview and it went very well. And one of the questions was, "What? I think you want to do dentistry, because why would you do shadowing?" And I had to convince them that no, I just wanted any experience I could get.
Yeah.
And there's so many opportunities there now. This is a long time ago, but now there's so many opportunities. And I think one thing I would say to anyone listening is it's just as important what you know, but who you know as well. And you've got to work a relationship piece in terms of relationship currency, in terms of networking. And there's way more opportunities now in terms of opening doors than what I had. And I want to, myself personally, I want to open those doors and help people. And if there's anyone listening, get in touch. I'm mentoring in a couple of different areas, and within our business. I joined Migrant Leaders, which is a charity. I've joined within our ERG group. I'm a mentor. The Controls Hub, I'm a mentor. So I want to help young people that are coming through, or people that want to learn and help people, because that's opportunities I didn't have, and there's so many opportunities out there. If you just connect with the right people, and doors can open.
100%. And the world needs more people like you. It does. And one thing you mentioned there as well is that when you're young, that just networking and relationship building. Another thing I really liked about the UTC is every time I've been I've had 3 tours. I've been sort of walked around by different students, and they say they get different students every time to walk around because it builds a confidence. And they were so confident and intelligent, but that is very daunting. If I think of myself at like 15, having to walk 2 strangers around a school, it'd be really daunting. But it's just a challenge, isn't it? It's like anything. I think they should do public speaking in schools when they're really young, and that entrepreneurial piece, because these are the things that actually you can walk through the door, but if you've got no confidence to sell yourself, then unfortunately, realistically now, if we talk manufacturing, you're not going to get the job because they think this is going to be too much of a gap for me to get and for me to be, and these are the skills that need to be taught for me.
Absolutely right. I think communication is a big one, in terms of selling yourself, in terms of articulating what your capabilities are, in terms of, can you do the job? It goes as simple as that, isn't it? You're employing someone to do X job. Are you able to do that? But even within my own career, how willing are you to go beyond that job? If something's not in your job description, are you willing to do it? People are constantly, checking and monitoring your behavior or your attitude. And that's what's going to get you places. Not firstly, can you do the job, and can you articulate that you can do X or Y, whatever's necessary. So I think absolutely communication is a big one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what's going to help you in networking, in interviews, in your career, presentations, influencing, and leadership as well. It's all down to communication.
Yeah, completely agree. And just finally, in terms of there might be only so much you can say with a company like Hitachi, a big business, a lot of obviously confidential stuff, but plans for the next 12 to 18 months, I imagine a lot on your agenda to sort.
Yes, yeah, I think workload's a big one in terms of globally. We're trying to articulate, right, what are the projects we have now, what are the future opportunities coming in, what is the capacity, where do we need to hire, where do we need to invest, all of those kind of things. And where are we meeting at program level, project level? Are we meeting the customer requirements, in terms of time, cost, quality within the necessary scope? Are we meeting customer requirements, but also business requirements at a project level? And when you add that all together within a portfolio, what does that do? Is that aligned with the company strategy? And where does the business want to be going forward? So yeah, really exciting time, really exciting space. And I think a lot of the things that the business are doing is helping massively, firstly, customers. It's helping, passengers. I ride on the trains. I'm sure a lot of people do. It helps the economy. And in terms of the way they do it, in terms of sustainability, in terms of the things we talked about, I think a thing that they talk about is powering good, and social enterprise, social innovation, and doing it in the right way, in a way that helps society. So yeah, I think as a business, absolutely aligns with my own vision, my own personal vision, and a lot of exciting things to come, especially from a technology perspective as well. Smart ticketing, as we mentioned, artificial intelligence, bullet trains, maglev, all of that kind of good stuff. It's a really exciting space.
Yeah, nice, Bill. Look, I just want to thank you for this because I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been a real insightful conversation. This one, I've really enjoyed it, and I probably rambled on myself too much. To be honest with you, so apologies for that. But I've just enjoyed our chat. But
Thank you.
I think you're a real inspiration, and I mean that. Do you know what I mean? In terms of for as I've mentioned a few times, there'll be people listening to this, perhaps of all ages, perhaps a little bit lost in the way, maybe in terms of their own career, and I think this will be a real inspiring one for them. But we've talked about some really important stuff, and I appreciate that because these global issues, ethical leadership, sustainability, it's all stuff that is coming. Thankfully, is now coming to the forefront.
Yeah,
and I think, as we've discussed, it's gone from something which is talked about as a challenge to an opportunity. And I think that's, I think a lot of people listening here today will go, actually, this is something we can utilize and we can sort of lean into. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been a real powerful one. So thank you. It's been great.
Thanks very much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Manufacturing Leaders Podcast. It absolutely means the world to me. Please let me know if you need any assistance. As a business, we look at providing partnerships with manufacturing engineering companies to really help their recruitment and retention. On the recruitment piece, anywhere from blue collar, semi-skilled staff, right the way up to C-suite level executive appointments, but also much more than that. We run events, so please let me know if you're interested in any of those. If you are interested indeed becoming a podcast guest, be very, very keen to speak to you as well. More than happy to do so. But as a business, as I say, we look at key partnerships to really help your recruitment, your retention, your marketing, your training. We really believe in the partnership piece and being an extension of your business. So we're very proud to work in this sector. I love manufacturing engineering, and my staff are just as passionate about it as I am. So thank you once again for listening. Please get in touch to talk about anything we can do to help. Look forward to speaking to you very soon. Thank you.